Economic Development Board of Rotterdam, and I have been asked to answer some questions in regard to the revitalization of downtown Rotterdam. In the competitive world of modern cities, where wealth, capital, and talent can live anywhere, can work anywhere, can invest anywhere, it's very important that your city be identifiable and that that be a positive image. In the past, if you were a big industrial power, or in the case of Rotterdam, you were a world port, that was enough. In the modern world, business requires more. From an economic development point of view, it's very important that you pay attention to the quality of the experience of being in your city. It's important that when people come to Rotterdam to visit or to do business, they have a positive experience, not just because there are attractions, but because the ambience of the city is appealing. But more importantly, it's important that the quality of the place to live is also very high. On top of that, many cities, my city in Vancouver being a vivid illustration, have learned that there is another economic development potential, a huge economic development potential, in enticing people of all kinds of households to come back and live in the heart of the city. In North America, and this to some degree is true in Rotterdam as well, since the war we saw an exodus of people from the core city out into the suburbs. That malaise that set into the core cities really needed to be addressed. And smart cities, and I think Rotterdam is one of those cities, I've argued that for the last 3 or 4 years, really can entice people to come back and live if they offer them a very good, a positive quality of life. When you start to draw people back, what happens is you start to see a demand at the political level to reinvest in the quality of that city. If people come back and live wherever they live, they want a quality living environment for themselves, for their children, for their families, and that causes them to themselves invest in the city, in the quality of their own housing, and the way they move around, and what they do and what they spend, and to look to government and commerce to do the same thing. So densification is the way to set off the opposite kind of economic activity than we've seen in many cities, which was a down spiral. It's a way to set off an up spiral of investment, of energy, of talent into your city, and it creates, in and of itself, a lot of quality. Densification, though, is not something that most consumers, when they're looking at housing, find inherently appealing. We have in our culture a kind of a mystical idea about rural living. The suburban life doesn't really fulfill that, but many consumers think it does. They think they get more space. And so, in order to make densification successful, you have to make sure that the quality of the community in which you're building is also very high, so that you can compete with the natural inclination of people to move to the more spacious suburban situation. So what does that mean? That means the quality of the housing and the buildings has to be high. It means that the quality of the public environment around has to be high. It means the quality of the commercial services that are available to people. Walking between a 5 and 7 minute walk from their homes has to be high. It means that the juxtaposition of housing and workplaces has to be very close. And it means that you have to have complete communities. Communities that have public facilities and services, communities that have parks and open space. Communities, in a word, that I would desire and that I would prefer as a consumer. Then density works. And when density works, then all of the other benefits that I've talked about come into play for your city. Around the world, cities that are realizing the combination of quality and density are getting ahead of other cities from all of those points of view and from the economic point of view that I described in the first question. Rotterdam naturally has many of the qualities that make for an attractive city to live in and an attractive city to re-densify. The scale is very nice. It already has a pedestrian orientation. It has a very nice ambience and quality in the existing neighborhoods. And it has that magnificent advantage of being on the water. What Rotterdam needs is an agenda for development, an agenda to enhance its quality, an agenda for the repopulation of the city. Rotterdam needs the kind of what I call the living first strategy that we implemented in Vancouver starting about 15 years ago. When I was the urban critic in Rotterdam several years ago, I laid out what I felt was a viable agenda for the city in order to begin to entice people to come back and live by the tens of thousands. What was that agenda? Well, first, to have a plan for the redevelopment and, well, not the redevelopment, but really the further development, infill intensification of the city. It doesn't happen well by accident. It shouldn't happen that way. It needs to have a plan. Very much a big part of that plan is the open space provisions and allowances. You already have a team working on a green frame for the inner city of Rotterdam. They're a very important team for the development of the city, and you need to support them to get that green park frame in place so there's a continuity of open space. Then you need guidelines so that the quality of buildings relates to issues of livability. Now, you already build very beautiful buildings from an architectural point of view. You have an extraordinary architectural prowess in the city. But those buildings often don't perform from the point of view of the day-to-day requirements of livability. If you're a family, if you have children living in the heart of the city, then buildings need to do certain things for you. There needs to be play space. The size of the units needs to be appropriate for a family. There needs to be access between that unit and play space. There needs to be a management of noise to bring the ambient noise levels down. There needs to be green to soften the natural inclination in higher density for harsh building materials. And there needs to be the caprices that are very important, public art, beautiful scenery, and other things like that. So that's the second part. The third part is that you have to have coherent neighborhood units. You have to have everything a person needs in a neighborhood between a 5 to 7 minute walk. This means you need to look and make sure that you have enough commercial services, retail services, and you have to have the community facilities as well. Rotterdam has made a start on many of these fronts in a number of the new communities that have begun to be constructed. What I notice, however, often is that the overall number of people in any one of the communities is generally not enough to economically and viably support retail at the level of a food store, a pharmacy, and other kinds of day-to-day needs that people have in terms of retail. Also, the availability of public services has not been as clearly organized at a community level than it might be to make it just very, very immediate as a resource to a family who might come back and live in the city. Those things are very important. And then on top of that, it needs a lot more attention to the detailed ambience. Landscaping is very important. It's something that Rotterdam needs to work on. As I said when I was there 2 years ago, I believe you should plant 50 to 100,000 trees in the heart of the city, street trees in the public realm as quickly as possible, and as big as possible as well. In addition to general quality, cities all over the world have to tap into that special character that is their city and differentiates their city from other cities in order to be competitive. So Rotterdam needs to think, what are those qualities? In Rotterdam, I believe, for example, that the modern architecture is very, very unique in the European sense, and the marvelous expression of architecture that has already occurred in the city is important to its character and should be built right in as an aspiration as you develop more buildings and develop more livability. This is one thing. The other thing is that you have a very unique stand of post-war buildings that are not being valued as highly as they might be, and that create a great inspiration for contemporary architecture, such as the Linebaum, which is, to me, an absolutely iconic and beautiful post-war development that sets Rotterdam apart from other cities. The final thing I would talk about is you need to target families with children. In densification in the modern world, it's not going to be good enough just to target the young singles and the empty nesters. There's not enough of them to really create the vibrant marketplace and the vibrant place you want. So you do have to target families with children. Rotterdam is a city of young families with children. And so there are special conditions there that have to be brought into the equation as you develop the city for that purpose. So there is a hard planning job to do to entice people to come back and live in Rotterdam. There is a social organization, governmental job to do. There is a much more emotional thing to tap into, and then there is a cultural planning job to do as well. Rotterdam, however, to close, I would say, is very, very well placed, both in terms of the government's inclinations, in terms of the people's understanding, and in terms of the innate qualities of the city to achieve everything you need to achieve. I feel very excited about Rotterdam at this point. I feel now for Rotterdam the way I felt for Vancouver back in 1989 and 90 and 91, where I could see all the potential and I saw all of the interest and understanding, and all of what we needed to do was to pull ourselves together, to work cooperatively together, and to make it happen. There needs to be a government regime of cooperation between the public and private sector, and particularly taking advantage of the wonderful nonprofit societies for housing that you have in Rotterdam, which again make you very unique in the world. But that partnership is important in the modern world. You know, a company, a private development company, can't create by itself all of the qualities that families need in a community. A city can't create by itself all of the housing qualities that are needed in a viable city, enticing people to live in the city. But together, you can create a product from a consumer point of view that a wide range of consumers wish to pay for it. And that is really what will drive the repopulation of Rotterdam at a very nice density that then works from the point of view of health, the environment, and the ambience of the city, and your economic competitiveness.